face. It wasn't a rage that could be dumped into words and then blow over. It was a grim rage turned inward that must have been smoldering in her for a long time. Now the woman leaned on the railing with outstretched arms, and her heels slipped out of her shoes. Now she jumps, he thought. Gregorius left the umbrella to a gust of wind that drove it over the railing, threw his briefcase full of school notebooks to the ground, and uttered a string of curses that weren't part of his usual vocabulary. The briefcase opened up and the notebook slid onto the wet pavement. The woman turned around. For a few moments she watched unmoving as the notebooks darkened with the water. Then she pulled a felt-tipped pen from her coat pocket, took 2 steps, leaned down to Gregorius and wrote a line of numbers on his forehead. "Forgive me," she said in French, breathless and with a foreign accent, "but I mustn't forget this phone number, and I don't have any paper with me." Now she looked at her hands as if she were seeing them for the first time. "Naturally, I could have." And now, looking back and forth between Gregorius's forehead and her hand, she wrote the number on the back of the hand. I didn't want to keep it. I wanted to forget everything. But when I saw the letter fall, I had to hold on to it." The rain on the thick eyeglasses muddied Gregorius's sight, and he groped awkwardly for the wet notebooks. The tip of the felt pen seemed to slide over his forehead again, but then he realized it was now the fingers of the woman who was trying to wipe away the numbers with a handkerchief. "It is out of line, I know." And now she started helping Gregorius gather up the notebooks. He touched her hand and grazed her knee, and when the 2 of them reached for the last notebook, they bumped heads. "Thank you very much," he said when they stood facing each other. He pointed to her head. "Did it hurt?" Absently, looking down, she shook her head. The rain beat down on her hair and ran over her face. "Can I walk a few steps with you?" Yes, of course," Gregorius stammered. Silently, they walked together to the end of the bridge and on toward the school. The sense of time told Gregorius that it was after 8 and the first hour had already begun. How far was a few steps? The woman had adjusted to his pace and plodded along beside him, as if she would go on like that all day. She had pulled the wide collar of her coat so high that from the side Gregorius saw only her forehead. "I have to go in here, into the gymnasium," he said, and stood still. "I'm a teacher." "Can I come along?" she asked softly. Gregorius hesitated and ran his sleeve over his wet glasses. "In any case, it's dry there," he said at last. She went up the stairs. Gregorius held the door open for her, and then they stood in the hall, which seemed especially empty and quiet now that classes had started. Her coat was dripping. "Wait here," said Gregorius, and went to the bathroom to get a towel. At the mirror he dried the glasses and wiped off his face. The numbers could still be seen on his forehead. He held a corner of the towel under the warm water and wanted to start rubbing when he stopped in the middle of the movement. That was the moment that decided everything, he thought when he recalled the event hours later. That is, all of a sudden he realized that he really didn't want to wipe away the trace of his encounter with the enigmatic woman. He imagined appearing before the class afterward with a phone number on his face. He, Mundus, the most reliable and predictable person in this building and probably in the whole history of the school, working here for more than 30 years, impeccable in his profession, a pillar of the institution, a little boring perhaps, but respected and even feared in the university for his astounding knowledge of ancient languages, mocked lovingly by his students who put him to the test every year by calling him in the middle of the night and asking about the conjecture for a remote passage in an ancient text, only to get every time, off the top of his head, information that was both dry and exhaustive.